listening to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher. This episode is a slightly different format than past episodes. We're not doing a deep dive, long format interview, rather a quick look at some trending news this week. Everywhere I turn, YouTube and YouTube Kids seems to be in the headlines for less than stellar reasons. The latest issue revolves around a pedophile ring that's been exposed in YouTube's recommended algorithm, which is basically facilitating pedophiles' ability to connect with each other, trade contact info, and link to actual child pornography in the comments of otherwise innocent videos. Worse, these videos are actually being monetized, making money from people like Disney and Fortnite, who, by the way, have pulled their spends with YouTube this week. This stuff is happening on and around the videos that parents and kids themselves are posting to YouTube. That gymnastics video from that tournament last week? Yep, pedophiles are targeting videos just like that. So why are we talking about this today? Because kids spend a lot of time on YouTube, and parents who let their kids spend time on YouTube Kids assume that their kids should be safe there. So we're talking to an expert to find out a little bit more about the problem and how you can make YouTube a safer place. Today we're talking to Lisa Thie. Lisa is a tech industry leader with expertise in child safety. She is passionate about bringing leading-edge technology to protect vulnerable populations while helping parents to keep their kids safe in the digital age. She leads artificial intelligence teams to address the most pressing issues of human trafficking, child sexual abuse material, cyberbullying, mental health, and self-harm. Welcome to the podcast, Lisa.
Thank you, Rachel.
That felt like a heavy intro because it was just like, oh, Lisa talks about all the darkest, scariest parts of the internet. Get ready to party.
Well, I promise that we're going to leave you with things you can do to feel much more comfortable with giving your children those devices. So I think we're going to end on a good note today.
Okay, so break it down for me. YouTube has been in the news quite a bit this week for not so great reasons. So what is all the noise about?
Yeah, so there was a video that went viral in the last week under the YouTube Wake Up hashtag. And that video was highlighting a softcore child pedophile ring that is being facilitated on YouTube's platforms. And so it's really brought attention to how many things are going on the platforms like YouTube and YouTube Kids, because they are under the same umbrella, that may not be really public knowledge of parents as they're handing over their devices to their children.
Yes, definitely. So what are the pedophiles actually doing on YouTube to take advantage of the algorithm?
Yeah, a lot of it relates to the autoplays and being able to find content specific. And so with the artificial intelligence algorithms that are used on platforms that help suggest to us what we might be interested in, they're looking for what we have looked for in the past to drive more engagement. Their goal is to keep us on their platforms as long as possible. So when you can leverage somebody looking for something that's really inappropriate, it's going to start serving up more inappropriate things for them. So what we found in this instance that a blogger brought to everyone's attention and was brought actually so forward in attention that big brands are starting to pull advertising budgets is that for this group that's looking for this particularly inappropriate things, they're searching for things like yoga, things like gymnastics, things like swimming, to find videos of young children. We're not talking pubescent children, we're talking prepubescent children that are doing videos of themselves that are fairly innocent in nature. However, in the comments, what they're doing is they're looking for places where they're in compromising positions and time stamping those to communicate amongst themselves where they can forward to in those videos of their children doing things that all of our children do, like wanting to do a dance performance and maybe putting a cartwheel in and maybe their shirt would lift up during that time. So they're forwarding to those places where the children are in compromising positions to create their own curated content of what they're looking to see, which is not the same things that most people are looking for in those videos. And unfortunately, there is no lack of participation in those comment areas. There's quite a few people engaging in that. And with the autoplay functions, what we're finding is it's just bringing out more and more and more activity so that if somebody is really wanting to find that, it's quite easy between 2 and 5 clicks from a brand new account to find.
So expand on what is the autoplay function? What does that mean for people?
Myself, I enjoy Netflix. And you might notice when you're watching Netflix, it will suggest to you something next to watch as you finish an episode. Very similar function in YouTube. It's going to look at what your viewing history has been and suggest similar things that might be of interest to you. And unfortunately, if your interests are a little off, it will continue to serve you those kinds of content.
So, by these people leaving notes in the comments or comments with these timestamps saying, like, oh, at minute 112, the shirt flies up in a cartwheel or something like that, is that telling YouTube's algorithm something else that starts to pull all of that together? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing more is that when you click on videos of little girls doing things, it's going to serve you up more videos of little girls doing things. So the example of the that was shown in the video that went viral was an adult man searched for a bikini videos of adult women, and in his sidebar on the recommended actions to see the next videos, a few of them were mixed in with very young girls. So when he clicked on that very young girl video, it started feeding his whole feed of suggested next videos with only young girls. And so it really started to pull him down that rabbit hole. He used the term wormhole of content that's very specific to what they were looking for. And in the comments, they were also sharing things like social media handles. They were sharing links to very explicit child pornography. So this was well beyond just time stamping. It was building a community and allowing them to trade more information about what they were really after.
And it's important to note that these videos, these are the types of videos that your kids are either posting of themselves or parents posting of their kids, right? When you say like a gymnastics tournament or a swim meet or a dance performance or whatever it is, this is very innocent stuff that general average users are posting online, right?
Yes, I think it's really important to remember that just because you can put some context to something and know, oh, maybe I can see something in the bathtub, for instance, but it's just a little kid. Everybody, it's cute. That your viewership, when you put these things in public forums, may not be looking at the world with the same lens that the people that you typically surround yourself do. And it's really critical to really think through privacy for your own child before you start putting up those videos, because I know my daughter's 7 and the only thing she wants to do is be YouTube famous right now. But I have to acknowledge to her that once I put her out there in a public way, you can't take it back. And I think it's really important to think through some of those things as you're deciding for yourself what your comfort levels are.
Well, so from a scale perspective, how much of this is happening on YouTube? So it are we under the assumption that it's just kind of like a small slice of bad guys out there making it bad for everybody? What's the real scale of this problem?
To be frank with you, I worked with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in 2017 to help them accelerate reports from the tech industry into law enforcement. They're congressionally mandated to take reports of child abuse material. And what we found was the growth in this area was quite surprising. In 2013, their team of analysts had to identify where in the world they thought this content came from and report it to the local jurisdiction law enforcement for 500,000 cases that year. By the time that we deployed a solution in 2017, we were dealing with a 10.5 million report problem. In this country, we talk about an epidemic of opioids. And when you look at the same season, it's roughly 92% growth rate. So I don't know what 2,000% is if 92% is an epidemic. With the explosion of social and mobile and cloud and the interconnectedness we all have at the touch of a button, there are people that maybe would have not made such poor choices, but it's so easy and it takes such a short period of time to get into something that's just really inappropriate that I think that there's just a community out there that is growing. of people that are taking advantage of that.
And technology is giving them the tools to grow. And platforms like YouTube, their algorithms are almost being friendly to them to allow them to grow communities and to spread, the types of things that they're looking for.
Yeah, I think to be fair, Rachel, throughout human history, there have been people that have made poor choices in this area. This isn't a new problem.
Yeah.
I think the challenge is that that problem can scale to be more normalized. And so I think more people get affected by that problem because, frankly, if you were trying to do this in the 1970s, it would be a very large barrier for entry to find this kind of content. You'd have to be incredibly intentional to find that community. But today, with a click of a button, you can find people that have similar interests, and it normalizes behavior that's anything but normal.
So technology's just made it really, really easy.
Yes, in the same way it has benefits, right? We have mommy groups and we have ways to promote our business. And there's so many wonderful things that come with technology. But unfortunately, sometimes there are unintended consequences. And I think creating communities for people with really illegal intentions has been one of those unintended consequences.
So, around that, why, if we're handing our kids YouTube Kids, why do they end up getting exposed to scary things there? It feels like all roads seem to lead to pornography on YouTube, if I'm being really alarmist. But like the Kinder Egg surprise videos can lead to some actual horrible surprises, right? How is that happening?
Yeah, so when you look at YouTube broadly as an umbrella, and YouTube Kids does its best to make it specific for children, but it's still a platform for user-generated content. And on YouTube, on any average day, they're generating 50 million hours of user-generated content per day. It's impossible to review all of that with human eyes. And so, with that in mind, we rely on algorithms and artificial intelligence to help the humans to know what to look for to get the most egregious things off of the systems. And it is a very good system in place to do that. However, it is not perfect. And when you're looking at that much content, even if you only have 1% of things that fall through the cracks, it's still a pretty sizable amount of content. And so it really is important that parents recognize their role in the digital lives of their children, and they have to stay engaged. They can do that directly by being in the same room while their children are watching that and you watch it all together. I'm a working mom of 2 kids. That's not really realistic for me when I'm handing over technology. It's typically because I have something I really need to get done. So I leverage more technological solutions to help me to know when things go off the guardrails so that I can have teachable moments with my kids and strengthen that bond, because right now they're young enough that they care what I think. And it gives us an opportunity to talk about things as they're being exposed to them. I don't have to talk about things that are age inappropriate for them that they're not going to know about for 4 or 5 years because I know they're not being exposed to it because I monitor that. But in the future, when they do get exposed to it, and maybe it is a couple years too young. One example I saw recently was a 11-year-old boy had Googled for a hamster because his family was searching for a pet. And some really graphic pornography involving hamsters came back. That child was not seeking to see something inappropriate. That parent was not being negligent by handing over that technology, but because that parent was using a monitoring solution, they were able to identify that that had actually occurred. Because the child was ashamed. They were embarrassed. They didn't want to talk to their mom about that, and so they didn't. So because of that monitoring solution, that parent was able to intervene and have a teachable moment with that child and put that in context for them. So it's not something that they feel shameful about because it was very unintentional.
So you mentioned two things that I think are really important. One is using and enjoying technology together out in the open, so we all know what's going on. The other part is I don't want to say it's inevitable, but the odds are your kids are going to run into something. We're going to run into stuff that we wish we wouldn't have online, right? And we need to be able to have conversations about those things without shame.
I think it's really important because if you're not having those conversations with your kids, by the time they hit junior high, I guarantee you they're having them with each other. And it just takes any kid whose parents don't have their hands on the wheel that the information spreads pretty quickly. So it's not that you are thinking that your child's going to go out there and do something bad is why you have to have be more involved and be monitoring your children, it's because every kid has that one friend. We all know that one friend. um, and
Oh,
and you want to
I
be.
hope my kid is not that friend.
I'm pretty sure my youngest will be, but he's still sick, so we have some time. But with that in mind, kids are going to be exposed to more things than we were exposed to at younger and younger ages. And you really don't want them learning it from the internet and their peers. You want to be there helping to set the tone for those things.
And the more you talk about it, the more those uncomfortable conversations become very normal. We use so many of all the appropriate words for body parts and situations and all the things that my kids tend to, use those with other people. And the people are like, what? Oh, like we've kind of over
Horrible.
normalized at our house. It's good, it's healthy, but other people got to catch up.
Yeah, before I did research deeply into the lives of digital natives and what they experience on a regular basis, I would have thought that fourth grade is too young to talk about these things. But what I'm finding is they're trading pictures with each other. When they have cell phones, when the average age is 10 for the first cell phone in the United States, they have cameras. A lot of parents think Snapchat is cute because they can put little filters on, and they don't recognize that their children are being directly served explicit images in the stories section from following celebrities. And they're replicating what they're seeing. And they also are asking each other for things. So it's pretty scary how their protective barriers over time get eroded, because when you've seen an explicit image of someone in your school by the time that you're 14 years old, it doesn't seem so strange if an adult sends you one. It's getting more and more normalized. And most of those communications happen in direct communications on platforms like social media, on email, on text. They're not in public places. So it's really important to have something to help you to know when mistakes pivot from being affordable mistakes to life-altering mistakes, and that where you need to step in.
You're listening to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher. We'll be back right after this.
If you're enjoying this topic today, might I recommend a few others from the archive? Check out episode 16 with Naomi Riley, author of Be the Parent Please, Stop Banning Seesaws and Start Banning Snapchat. You can also check out our 3-part Tech Reset series, which is episodes 7, 8, and 9. These are short, 15 minutes or less episodes on some of the screen time rules that have helped the most at our house. And just to round things out, be sure to check out the blog post on todaysmama.com, the podcasts I make my teenagers listen to. I've put together a big master list for you. All those links will be in the show notes, and I think that should keep you busy for a while. You can find links to those and more at todaysmama.com/podcast.
And now back to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher.
Now, you mentioned having monitoring solutions. So here's the part where we tuck everybody in and make them feel a whole lot better. There's actually some really cool tools and things that can really help. What are your top recommendations?
Yeah, so my first recommendation is in the area of child safety, there's kind of 2 categories of things that you can use. There's some things that will help you with content filtering and blocking, which I think people are pretty familiar with. So those are things like Net Nanny, Circle by Disney, using the iOS 12 features where you can now monitor it and control some screen time and things of that nature. Or if you're a Google family, look at Google Family Link, which I personally use, I really like. On the other side of the fence is the content moderation side of the house. And that is being inside the accounts to direct communications that are happening when your child is communicating with other people, especially around user-generated content platforms. I think that's where a lot of people fall down and don't recognize that's a necessary component in what's happening to keep their kids safe. You can't block and filter things that they're generating themselves. So if a child is bullying your child, that's not downloaded from the internet, that's not going to be readily available for you to see and block. So it's a matter of keeping a digital eye on your child. And so I recommend Bark. This is technology that will let you know when somebody has sent something to your child that is inappropriate in the areas of sexting, but also cyberbullying, suicide, depression, alcohol, drugs, violence, all of those components. Computers have been trained to recognize signs that something is wrong and let you know that that's happened, so you can have a teachable moment with your child at that time.
And let's face it, I don't think any of us have the time or interest to read all of our kids' text messages. I just don't. But if something can flag me, I will check in at random. My kids know my physical version of Bark is that I grab their phone at any time I want, pick a message and read it. So they can just keep them on their toes so they feel the lack of privacy that they should feel online and on the internet, that they shouldn't have any expectation that what they do there can be private or that it doesn't leave a digital footprint. I very much want them to feel that. But I'm not going to catch everything, you know? So I do love that about Bark is.
Yeah, and even if you read it, sometimes it's the teen speak is really hard to understand. I mean, the mix of emojis and acronyms and the way that they communicate, every generation has their own way of doing that. And so machines are much better at understanding what they're reading, sometimes than even parents. So at Bark, they've trained on over 1 billion conversations between children over the last 4 years. And then in addition to that, they have a team of parents that are trained to recognize things when the computer is not sure if it's a gray line. So you're almost getting a parenting army behind you to help you keep your kids safe. It's not just all on your shoulders, because I think we live in a time of being busy and overwhelmed and exhausted, and we need more support, not more blame and shame, to help our kids make it through these formative years.
Now, if you are one of those parents or kids who have posted a video to YouTube and you've got a channel or you just have a couple videos hanging out there, what should they do about this current noise from YouTube about the pedophiles and the way they've been leaving comments? What are the things that parents and kids should think about when they post a video to YouTube and to keep themselves safe over there with their own content?
Yeah, I think on the own content side, just recognize that if you see any aberrant behavior, you can always block users from being able to comment on your page. Please make sure you report. These companies really rely on the public to help them know when things go sideways. So it's really, really important every time that you see it on your own channel or someone else's channel that you do report. That does help those companies get that content down. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen as fast as we'd like sometimes. So just be aware that anything you put out there, you should expect that anybody on earth is going to be able to see and interact with that content. And I want you to think about that before you decide to post or not. It's really important to look at it from different lenses beyond your own.
So important. It goes back to that whole privacy thing. No matter what you're posting or where you're posting it, just consider that everybody on planet Earth could see that. And you know what?
Yeah.
My favorite example right now, and not to throw Jeff Bezos under the bus, but maybe just a little. Um, he is the richest man on planet Earth, right? And he's got himself in a situation where some of his personal private photos are up for discussion in the public eye, and that, he's kind of tried to be held blackmailed and other things from publications. Now, this is a guy who is brilliant technologically, who has all the money and resources to have as much security as probably humanly possible, but even he is not immune for what can happen with something that's been created digitally. So
It really is important to not only watch what your kids are doing, but role model good behavior.
yes.
I think sometimes we get really infatuated with the shiny new thing. And it's important to think through that, kids listen to what you say about half as much as they watch what you do, right? And so, there's an element of role modeling that's involved in here. There's an element of being mindful. And there's also, I think I've heard you mention this before, Rachel, that mindset of using device for their specific purpose and not making everything a supercomputer.
Yes.
And then also making sure that you have really good boundaries around how and when things are used. I think that allows people to have the space to take a beat and think about what they're putting out there before they do it, because unfortunately, once it's out there, it's virtually impossible to get it back.
Yes. Now, as a parent, I am often so frustrated by these platforms. I understand it's an overwhelming, problem for them to manage, and that the volume that's there is really high, and that we as a society have a role in this, right? Because if there's that much content, there's people creating it, and there's demand for it. I recognize all those things. However, what can we do as digital citizens to demand more from these platforms?
That's a great question, Rachel. When you look at how legislation's been passed, there was a law that was passed almost 19 years ago now called the Communication Decency Act 230. And it was a law that was needed at the time at the infancy of the internet because it was protecting platforms from being liable for slander for what people put on their platform. So if it's a third party, they're not responsible for what people post on their platform. But I think it's created a playground for people that have poor intentions, in that there's no legal responsibility on behalf of really anyone to be monitoring what's happening here. And my personal opinion, I don't think it's broadly shared, but my personal opinion is, we had cars on the roads for about 20 years before somebody thought to put a seatbelt in them. And eventually you have enough accidents and you have enough things that necessitate street signs and laws and seatbelts to help with that. In today's day and age, we're at a 50-year high for suicides for girls. I think we all know that our kids are doing things online that they wouldn't do to each other in the real world. And so I think that it's important that people make their voices heard as parents back to these companies of what they expect from them. Because since there aren't any legal ramifications for this behavior, really the best voting that you have is consumer pressure. Because if it's in their business interest, they will absolutely respond.
Now, and here's the big thing, and this just gives me like the chills to say it out loud, is the fact that we are the generation of grown-ups to do something about this problem. We are the generation of grown-ups that existed back in the day when they had to say, hey guys, we need seatbelts and speed limits and all of these things. Like, this is absolutely the work of parents today, is to fix this thing.
I have left my very traditional engineering career to focus specifically on this because I think anybody who's an insider that sees what can happen on these platforms wants more for all of us.
I love that. We want more for all of us. And technology, I don't want to overshadow the fact that it is fantastic. And there's a quote somewhere, and I will leave credit in the show notes because I can't think of who said it, but basically that technology has caused 99% of our problems and also provided 99% of the solutions.
Absolutely. I mean, I am a lover of technology. I live in California. My children have tablets and they love to play math games on them, and they're doing wizard battles and they're having a blast, and they're also learning. My husband and I are able to work from vacation and call into a meeting from Hawaii and then spend the rest of our day with our families because of technology. There's so many wonderful things that technology brings to bear, and it's incredibly unrealistic to pretend like your children are not going to be exposed to technology over time. It's not going to go away. We can't reverse the hands of time. But what we can do is acknowledge our responsibility as parents to make sure that we are staying engaged in our children's digital lives. And there are a lot of technology tools that can help you to do that in a way that is not overwhelming. Frankly, if you give yourself 30 minutes to an hour when you first give your children devices to set them up properly, and to leverage commercially available tools, things like Circle, things like Bark, things like the iOS 12 functions. And those companies will all give you technical support. You don't need to go get an engineering degree to figure out how to use them. They will help you through that process every step of the way. You've just saved yourself hundreds of hours of spot checking for the rest of your child's time, because it's going, when you think about it, how much time do you spend picking up that phone, looking at things every day? That's probably 15 minutes, and you're doing it for 10 years and you're doing it every day. That's a lot of time you could have back to be doing some self-care, because frankly, I don't know any mom these days that's getting enough self-care.
Oh, absolutely. Let's take all those minutes and just create a lot of really spa days.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. I think we should take our time back. And I think technology can help us to do that and keep our kids safer.
Absolutely. Okay, now Lisa is such a depth of knowledge. We're just scratching the surface with you. And so everybody needs to stay tuned because we're going to have you back and we're going to be hearing more from you on future episodes. But for now, if people want to connect with you online, where can they find you?
The best place to find me is on LinkedIn under Lisa Fee. And if you want to learn more about Bark, you can go to bark.us, or you can find it in the Apple Store or the Google Play Store. And if you are a Facebook user, I highly recommend the group Parenting in a Tech World, where users are consistently talking about all of these challenges. So you have a community to leverage to ask your questions and get feedback, and know that there's, as many different ways to parent in a tech world as there is to parent. So you're going to get a wide variety of perspectives.
Okay, love it. I will have all of those links in the show notes so they can follow up, find that group. I think we've also got a discount code for Bark. So if you want to sign up for that app or download that app, I think it's like 10% off because that app does have a monthly fee with it, right? So we'll make sure to save you a little bit there. And that is all for this week. This episode was quick and dirty. And we had to talk about the dirty parts of YouTube. So there you go. There's your message. And we will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
Be sure to check out the show notes on this episode. I've included a couple of helpful articles as well as the actual YouTube video from the blogger who exposed this whole thing. As I mentioned, we've got a discount code for the app Bark and links to the groups and tools that Lisa mentioned. Here's the thing. Here's my final takeaway today on this one. Figuring out how to manage your family's tech use in one fell swoop can feel overwhelming. Today, just think about YouTube. What can you do to make YouTube a safer place for your family? Go in and adjust your settings. Don't know how? Google parental controls for YouTube. Do a little digging. Educate yourself a bit more. And I might leave a few links in the show notes just to help. Install some apps to help. Lisa mentioned some great ones. At our house, YouTube is blocked as a website and an app on cell phones. If we want to watch something on YouTube, we've decided the best place for that is on our desktop computer right out in the open. Next, talk to your kids. Have they run into things that have made them feel uncomfortable? What do they do? Let them know that you are here to help and that they can talk to you about that stuff, no shame included. It's lots of little steps like this that build a digital and physical environment for you and your family to have a positive experience with technology.
You've been listening to the Today's Mama podcast with Rachel Hersher. To find out more, go to todaysmama.com. That's today's, MAMA.com. Today's Mama, connecting moms and families with the best of today.